Well, we're going to finish up our study of Ecclesiastes. I know it's been a little strange. We started several months ago when we were able to meet together and to be able to interact with one another and to ask and answer questions and bounce ideas off of one another. And we've had to end under these COVID-19 stay-at-home restrictions. And so it's been a little different. It's been a little odd. Unable to have any back and forth, but I hope it's been beneficial to you. The last main section of Ecclesiastes starts in chapter 11 and verse 9, where the preacher says, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment." And so he begins with some admonitions to the young. And the first thing he says to them is to rejoice. "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth." And one of the reasons that he writes that, as we will see in a few minutes, is that he knows what it's like to be young. And he also knows what it's like to be old. And so he says to the young people, rejoice. Have fun. Enjoy being young. Let your heart cheer you. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. But always keep in mind, while you're doing these things that you believe are fun, and some of them are fun, but while you're having fun in your youth, always remember that you will give an account for those things. And while that is a sobering thought, and we will discuss that more here in a few minutes, while it is a sobering thought to understand that we will give an account for all of these things, he says to the young people to rejoice and to have fun, let your heart cheer you. In verse 10, "Remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity." And so he says, remove vexation from your heart. Earlier in this book, you may remember that he writes, the more you know, the worse off you feel. And that's true. When you get to peek behind the curtain, and when you get to see how things are done, sometimes it's very discouraging, and sometimes it's very vexing. Sometimes it's very frustrating. And so again, the writer says to the young people, remove vexation from your heart, because youth is fleeting. As you get older, things change. And in chapter 12, there's this famous paragraph that he writes about getting old. "Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened and the clouds return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men are bent and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the windows are dimmed and the doors on the street are shut, when the sound of the grinding is low and one rises up at the sound of a bird and all the daughters of song are brought low. They are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails, because man is going to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. Before the silver cord is snapped, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it." Now, I don't know what all of those figures of speech stand for, but it's fairly clear that what he is writing about is getting old, getting physically old. And as you grow older, things change. He talks about being afraid of heights. A little over 30 years ago, my brother-in-law and I built a log house. outside of Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. And it was on a hill, and we put all the logs together. We did essentially everything in it except put the roof beams up. I had ordered 4x6 rough cut beams, and I was too scared even at that age, and plus I just didn't know how to do it, to put them up. So we hired a professional contractor, and he came in and he put the beams up for us. But once they were up, my brother-in-law and I, we put the plywood down, we shingled it. I had no problem at all getting up on that roof, walking up and down the ladder, walking across the roof. No problem at all. About 5 or 6 years ago, I had to have a new roof put on my house here in Indianapolis, and I knew how to do it. But there was no way I was climbing up the ladder to get on top of the roof. I'm just afraid of those heights now, where 30 years ago, I didn't think a thing of it. I find myself driving slower than I did 30 and 40 years ago. One, because there's just really no reason to get out there and drive 70, 75, and 80 miles an hour. But part of it is, it's because it's just a little unnerving to get out on 465 and all these people doing 70, 75, and 80. It's just a little unnerving now in my old age, if you will. I don't hear as well as I used to. My eyesight is not as good as it once was. Things just start falling apart as you get older. Things don't work as well. When I walk, sometimes my knee joints pop. It's just a fact of life. As you get older, physically, things just start to fall apart. And so he says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Sometimes as you get older and you start suffering more physical pains, life's just not as enjoyable as it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so if you're a young person watching this, let me encourage you to heed the words of the preacher. Learn to enjoy yourself. Have fun, even though you know one of these days you will give an account for it. Enjoy yourself. Remove frustration and vexation from your heart, because the days are going to come when your body and your mind is not going to work as well as it does now. And the days may come in which you will say, I have no pleasure in these days. And then he closes that paragraph in chapter 12, in verse 8, with one of the most famous sayings in this book, vanity of vanity, says the preacher, all is vanity. And then, evidently you have an editor that added this last paragraph. Besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. My son, beware of anything beyond these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. And so this editor adds this little paragraph about the preacher, and how the preacher taught the people knowledge, and he arranged proverbs with great care, and he calls himself a wise man. And he says the words of the wise are like goads. One of the reasons that I so enjoy reading and studying Ecclesiastes is because it was written by a man who was wise. And a goad is something that you use to prod cattle along with. And this editor says that's what the words of the wise are like. They are like goads. Words of the wise should prod us, should move us along, and enable us to live life well. And so then he closes. The end of the matter all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. And so we can summarize Ecclesiastes, I think, in this way. The question that the preacher asked himself: what does man gain from his toil? And the answer that he found was, it's all vanity. What gain there is, there's not going to be much of it. And it's going to have very little substance. And what substance there is won't last very long. It's like a breath of air on a chilly morning. You see the vapor, and then it vanishes and disappears. But he ends by saying, but it all matters. And the reason that it all matters, even though there's not going to be much substance to it, and even though it's not going to last very long, the reason it all matters is because one day we're going to answer for it. And God's going to bring it into judgment. And so what the writer of Ecclesiastes teaches us is that there are going to be things in life that are not going to be fair. There are going to be things in life that are unjust. There are going to be fools in places of authority, while these wise individuals just walk by the wayside. And on the occasions that a wise man or a wise individual happens to say something and something good comes from that, the wise individual is not going to be remembered in future generations. And so life is going to be full of things that are frustrating to us. Life is going to be full of things that we don't think are fair. And some of them aren't going to be fair. And some of them aren't going to be right. And some of them aren't going to be just. But the writer says, don't let that keep you from doing what you ought to do. Eat, drink, enjoy your toil. Work. Work hard at it. Do good. Be generous. Be kind. Be loving. Amidst all the darkness that's going to be out there, we can still be good, godly, wise people. Amongst all the frustrations of life, and there are going to be many, in the midst of all of the pain and all of the trials and all of the tribulations that are going to come our way, and there will be many, we can still learn how to eat, drink, and enjoy ourselves. We don't have to give in to the frustration. We don't have to give in to the vexation. We don't have to give in to the seeming just utter nonsense of it all, that what we're going to get out of this life is not much, and it's not going to last very long. And there's not going to be much substance to it. But again, it all matters. Because one day, God's going to bring it all into judgment. With every secret thing. Whether it be good or whether it be evil. And so let me encourage you to read and study and to meditate on the book of Ecclesiastes often. Because the words of the wise are goads to make us be godly. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it, and hopefully we will be able to get back together soon.